Welcome to the Grace Notes podcast. Today we're going deep, really deep into this powerful theme, God's redemption of his people.
Yes, a theme that runs like a golden thread through the whole Bible, really.
Absolutely. And we've got some fantastic material to work with. We're drawing from a whole series of recent messages at Metropolitan Baptist Church.
Those are always so good.
They are. We've got Arthur Connor Jr., James Hanna, Reverend Rodman W. Cory, Reverend Justin Francis, and Reverend Dwight Fairclough, all sharing their wisdom and insights.
A real wealth of perspectives there.
Right. So our mission today is to unpack that, to get to the heart of how they understand redemption, and to see how that timeless truth still speaks to us today.
You know, it's never not relevant, is it? Redemption, freedom. These are things we're always grappling with on some level.
So true. Okay, so to kick things off, let's go back to the beginning. Arthur Connor Jr. started this whole series with Exodus. He really brought to life how this book is like a foundation.
Exodus is foundational in so many ways, right?
It is. He showed how it paints this vivid picture of God's redemptive character and his promise, his enduring promise to deliver his people.
And that promise echoes through everything that follows, doesn't it?
It does. It's like the DNA of the whole story. So in those early chapters of Exodus, we see the Israelites in this really intense situation, political slavery under a new pharaoh, this leader who didn't know Joseph, didn't care about the history, and just saw these growing numbers of Israelites. And he was afraid.
Fear is so often at the root of oppression, isn't it?
It is. Fear and a desire for control. Connor really highlighted how this Pharaoh's fear drove him to those oppressive actions.
Right, and you see in the forced labor building those huge cities like Pithom and Ramses, just back-breaking work.
Exactly. And Connor brought that to life, the sheer brutality of it. But then there's this incredible thing. Despite that suppression, the Israelites didn't get weaker. They actually multiplied.
It's almost like a paradox, isn't it? Christian backfiring. It's a testament to God's hand at work, even in those dark times.
Right. It's like saying you can't hold back what God intends to grow. But this growth, this unexpected thriving, just fueled the Egyptians' fear even more.
It did, and Pharaoh's response escalated, didn't it?
Yeah.
He goes from forced labor to essentially targeting their very lives.
Yes. That story of Pharaoh and the midwives, Shiphrah and Puah, is just so powerful. He commands them to kill the babies, infanticide, ordered by the king.
And they refuse.
Yeah.
They disobey an earthly ruler because they fear God more. That takes such courage.
It does. And their faith had real-world consequences. They saved lives. But when Pharaoh realized they defied him, he got even more brutal. Every newborn Hebrew son had to be thrown into the Nile River.
It's just horrific, the complete devaluation of human life.
Yeah.
But even in this terrible story, Connor points out this parallel for us.
Right. Israel's physical slavery becomes a mirror. It reflects our need for salvation, our own slavery to sin, and the ultimate redemption that God offers.
It's like this historical liberation is foreshadowing a spiritual one. And that's something God does throughout Scripture, isn't it? He uses these tangible events to illustrate these deeper spiritual truths.
He does. Exodus becomes this foundational story, a pattern for how God rescues his people from every kind of bondage.
Right. And it's not just a one-time thing. It's ongoing.
Yeah.
Connor even brought in Psalm 81, where God says, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt. And he connected that directly to our being brought out of slavery to sin.
It's the same God acting then and now.
Exactly. Same deliverer. And we see that redemption imagery again with the Passover, that blood of the lamb protecting them from death.
Yes. Applied to the doorposts, a sign of faith and a foreshadowing of Christ's blood.
It is. In 1 Peter 1:18-19, it talks about being redeemed, not with perishable things, but with the precious blood of Christ. That's the ultimate protection, the way to be spared.
Right. Deliverance always requires a deliverer. For them, it was God acting powerfully. For us, it's Jesus. But then Connor goes on to break down just how multifaceted their bondage was. Those 4 types of slavery they faced.
It's like peeling back the layers, isn't it? To really grasp the depth of their suffering. He talks about political slavery, how Pharaoh's fear led to them being denied basic human rights.
Freedom of speech, assembly, even just association, they couldn't live freely.
And then economic slavery, right? It's that relentless forced labor. They were being exploited, their work enriching Egypt while they suffered.
Their lives were made bitter. And then on top of that, there's social slavery. The decree to kill the male infants. Just so dehumanizing.
They were also facing racism, discrimination as immigrants. It's all woven together. And then, finally, Connor gets to spiritual slavery.
Right. He uses that image of the snake on Pharaoh's crown, connecting it back to Genesis, the servant, the fall. It's so potent.
Because ultimately, God's aim isn't just to change our circumstances, right? He wants to break the power of sin in us, to restore us to himself fully.
It's that deeper level of freedom, isn't it? So we're left with this question. Are we seeking relief from just outward challenges, or are we also recognizing that inner need for liberation from sin?
It's a good question to ask ourselves.
Yeah.
But then, in the second part of his message, Connor revisits those 4 slaveries, and he sets the stage for understanding God's response.
Right, and that response is centered on Moses, this one man raised up as a mediator, a deliverer.
And it's amazing to think about his beginnings. He's born into this terrifying situation, hidden by his mother, who sees he's special.
Even amidst all the fear and death, there's this sense of hope, right, of divine favor.
Yes, and then the way she puts him in that basket on the Nile, it seems crazy, but then Pharaoh's daughter finds him.
It's like God is orchestrating these events, working through these very human actions to accomplish his purposes.
Absolutely. And then Moses' sister steps in. She arranges for their own mother to nurse him, and Pharaoh's daughter pays her for it.
It's like this intricate tapestry woven together by God's hand. It's a reminder that he's always at work, even in the most unexpected ways.
So Moses grows up in this privileged environment in Pharaoh's household. But Connor emphasizes how he identifies with his people. They're suffering.
That connection seems so crucial for who he becomes, right?
Right, and it's what drives him to kill that Egyptian who's beating a Hebrew. Now, that act itself might not have been God's plan in that moment.
Impulsive, perhaps.
Maybe. But it reveals his heart, his sense of justice. And then when he tries to mediate between those 2 Hebrews, and they reject him.
It exposes how much he has to learn about leadership, about timing.
And about the resistance he'll face. Because that rejection by his own people, coupled with Pharaoh wanting him dead, leads to him fleeing.
He goes from this life of comfort and privilege to being a fugitive, hiding out in Midian.
But Connor is clear. This isn't abandonment, it's preparation. He's tending flocks, learning humility, patience.
It's like God is stripping away everything he thought he knew to shape him for the task ahead.
And even in Midian, God provides. He gets a new family, he's cared for. It's a reminder that God is with us even in the desert places.
But meanwhile, back in Egypt, God's people are still suffering. A new king, same oppression. It's like this reminder that God's timing isn't always our timing.
It's not. But Connor highlights that God remembers his covenant, the one he made with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That's such a key point.
It is, because it shows us God's faithfulness. He never forgets his promises, even when it seems like things are falling apart.
And then there's that powerful statement. God saw and knew the affliction of the Israelites. It's so personal, isn't it?
It is. It's not this distant, abstract knowledge. He sees their pain. He knows their hearts.
And that leads Connor to this application for us. God is never absent from our suffering. He's at work, even when we can't see it.
It's that trust, right? Trusting the process, even when it's hard. And that leads us perfectly to James Hanna and that incredible story of the burning bush.
Oh, that's a moment that changes everything, doesn't it? Moses on Mount Horeb, the mountain of God, and this bush is engulfed in flames but not consumed.
It's like a visual representation of God's presence, right?
Right.
Holy, powerful, beyond our understanding.
Totally. Moses is drawn to it, curious, and then God calls his name, Moses, Moses. And he simply replies, "Here I am."
That response gets me every time. It's simple, but it speaks volumes. He's ready, available, even before knowing what's asked of him.
Right. He's attentive, and then God tells him to take off his sandals because the ground is holy.
Yeah.
Such a powerful image of reverence.
And then God identifies himself, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, linking back to that covenant, that promise.
And Moses hides his face. Fear, awe, who wouldn't in that moment?
True reverence often starts with recognizing just how majestic and holy God is. It can be overwhelming.
It can. And then God says, "I have indeed seen the affliction of my people in Egypt. I have heard their cry."
Again, that personal connection. God isn't just aware. He sees, hears, knows their pain individually.
And he declares his intention to deliver them, to bring them to this good and spacious land, flowing with milk and honey.
Canaan, a land of abundance, of provision. It represents the richness of God's blessings.
It does. And Hanna emphasizes that their cries haven't gone unheard. God has seen their oppression.
And then comes the commission. Come, I will send you to Pharaoh, that you may bring my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt.
Wow, that's a huge task. And Hanna points out that often God prepares us for service through humility.
Moses, From the splendor of Pharaoh's court to a shepherd in the wilderness. It's quite a contrast.
It is. God works in unexpected ways, doesn't he? And he's faithful to his promises no matter what.
Even when we mess up, like Moses killing the Egyptian and then having to flee.
Right. Hanna brings in Hebrews 11, which talks about Moses choosing to suffer with God's people rather than enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. Even in his failures, there's this heart for what's right.
It's like God can redeem even our mistakes and use them for his purposes. And then Hanna circles back to that burning bush, emphasizing that true reverence comes from seeing God's majesty and holiness.
That image of the angel of the Lord in the flame of fire, it's a reminder that he's the creator, we're the created.
And he contrasts that with existentialism, which basically says we define our own purpose, but that burning bush points to something so much bigger than ourselves.
Absolutely. And those plagues that come later, they're a mockery of the Egyptian gods.
Yeah.
God showing his authority over all creation.
It's a power struggle, in a way. But Hanna makes this great point. Real movement in God's plan starts when we care about what he cares about.
When we see the things that break his heart and we're moved to action.
Yes. God sees the affliction of his people and he comes down to deliver them. That's divine condescension, isn't it?
It is. He lowers himself to meet our need. And it's all rooted in his love, his covenant. This plan wasn't a last-minute thing.
It's eternal, conceived within the Trinity. And Hanna brings in Isaiah 43.1, those beautiful words. I have redeemed you. I have called you by name. You are mine.
So personal. God claiming us as his own. And Hanna challenges us. Are we living for our own agendas, or are we letting God's purpose become central?
He connects that Old Testament story to our lives today, Israel's bondage mirroring our own enslavement to sin. And just like God raised up Moses, he's given us Jesus, the ultimate deliverer.
These connections are so important. It's like seeing the whole Bible as one unified story of redemption.
It is. And then Pastor Arthur Connor Jr. comes back to unpack those excuses Moses makes when God tells him to go to Pharaoh.
Exodus 3.9, right? It's so human, isn't it? Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh? That feeling of inadequacy, of being overwhelmed.
We've all been there, haven't we?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
But God's answer is so reassuring. I will be with you. It's like the call itself carries the promise of his enabling presence.
Our limitations don't limit God. And that's a promise that echoes throughout the Bible.
It does. And then Moses asks about God's name. It's like he needs more information, a better grasp of who he's dealing with.
And God replies, I am WHO, I am Yahweh. So profound.
Connor unpacks that as God declaring his self-existence, his eternity, his sovereignty. He's the foundation of everything. Romans 11.36 puts it beautifully. For from him and through him and to him are all things.
It's mind-blowing, really. And then Moses worries that the people won't believe him. He's focusing on his own lack of persuasive skills.
It's like he's saying, I'm not good enough at this.
Yeah.
But God's response is to give him signs. The staff turning into a serpent, his hand becoming leprous and then healed, water turning to blood.
It's like God saying, don't worry about your abilities, I'll provide the proof.
Right. Those signs were undeniable. But then Moses says he's slow of speech and tongue. He's worried about his eloquence.
And God, who created the human mouth, reminds him of that. He promises to give him the words he needs.
It's like our limitations don't have to hold God back. He can work through anything.
Absolutely. But finally, Moses just asks God to send someone else. He's reluctant, not fully committed.
And yet Connor highlights God's patience. He gives Moses Aaron, his brother, to be his spokesperson.
It's such a beautiful picture of how God provides, and also the importance of community, of supporting each other in ministry.
We weren't meant to do this alone. And then Reverend Rodman W. Cory takes over. He focuses on God's faithfulness, especially in the face of Moses' discouragement after Pharaoh's initial response.
Exodus 5.22-23, right. Moses goes back to God and he's like, why have you brought trouble? Why have you sent me?
It's raw honesty, isn't it? That feeling of I obeyed and things got worse.
It's a common struggle. But God's promise in Exodus 6.1 is so powerful, he says Pharaoh will let them go and even drive them out of Egypt.
It's God asserting his sovereignty, saying I'm in control even when it doesn't seem like it.
And then he reminds Moses who he is, the God who appeared to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He's grounding his present actions in his past faithfulness.
It's like he's saying, I haven't changed. I keep my promises.
Mm-hmm.
And Cory emphasizes that God hears the Israelites groaning. He remembers his covenant.
It's that personal connection again. He's not a distant observer. He's intimately involved. And then we get those 7 I will statements in Exodus 6.6-8.
Those are so powerful. God promises to bring them out from under the yoke, free them from slavery, redeem them with his might, take them as his own people, be their God, bring them to the promised land, and give it to them as a possession.
Wow, that's comprehensive. It covers everything. It's like this unshakable foundation for their hope.
But then it says the Israelites didn't listen to Moses. They were too discouraged, weighed down by their labor.
It shows how hard it is to hold on to faith in the midst of suffering, when it feels like nothing is changing.
It does. And yet God tells Moses to go back to Pharaoh. Again, it shows his persistence, his unwavering purpose.
Cory makes this really important point. Deliverance isn't always painless. There can be opposition, increased hardship before the breakthrough.
It's like refining fire. And he stresses that obedience is key, not our expertise or our feelings. God commands, we act.
And that's where community comes in again. We need each other to support and encourage us when it's hard.
Absolutely. And Cory reminds us that Moses' life is a testament to God's deliverance. He was rescued from the Nile as a baby, provided for in Midian. God revealed himself to him. It's all connected.
God's hand is on him throughout his journey, guiding him, shaping him.
And then there's that genealogy. It's like God is confirming their identity, their authority. They are who they say they are.
And ultimately, Cory points us to the greater deliverance. Jesus Christ, freeing us from the bondage of sin through his sacrifice and resurrection.
The Exodus becomes a type, a foreshadowing of that ultimate freedom.
It does. And he ends with that call to action from Matthew 28, the Great Commission. We who have been delivered are now called to help deliver others.
To be agents of God's grace in the world. To share that message of hope and freedom.
It's beautiful, isn't it? God's redemptive work extending outwards. And then Reverend Justin Francis jumps in, focusing on that initial confrontation with Pharaoh.
Let my people go, they declare. Exodus 5.1. But Pharaoh's response is defiance. He refuses to acknowledge God.
Who is the Lord that I should obey his voice? He says. It's pure arrogance, isn't it?
Total contempt for God. And instead of relenting, he makes things worse for the Israelites. He takes away their straw, but demands the same quota of bricks.
So vindictive. And the Israelites, understandably, blame Moses and Aaron. It's like, you made things worse.
It's that human reaction, isn't it? When obedience to God seems to backfire. And even Moses gets discouraged. He questions God.
Why have you brought trouble on this people? He asks. It's a heavy burden leading in the face of opposition.
And Francis reminds us that discouragement, difficulty, they're part of the journey, even when we're following God.
It's not always smooth sailing, but Francis points to God's sovereignty. He knew Pharaoh's heart would be hardened.
It's not excusing Pharaoh's actions, but it helps us understand the bigger picture. God's plan is still unfolding.
And despite the setback, Francis declares that God has never lost a battle. What a powerful reminder.
It is. He revisits Moses' earlier excuses, his inadequacy, his doubts, and God's patience, his provision of signs. They're all encouragements for us.
When we feel ill-equipped, God equips us.
He does. And even though things got worse initially, Moses still obeyed. It highlights that God's plan doesn't always make sense to us at first.
We might not understand the timing, the methods, but he's working it out.
And Francis talks about that temptation to regret obeying God when things get tough. But our feelings don't invalidate his wisdom.
It's about trusting his bigger picture, even when we can't see it.
Right. And then Francis brings up this really important caution about misinterpreting Scripture. He mentions the Hebrew Israelite movement as an example.
And the danger of allegorizing things in harmful ways. He stresses the need for sound biblical interpretation, for understanding the context.
His example of the prophecy about future slavery saying no buyer is so important. It directly contradicts the transatlantic slave trade.
It shows how crucial it is to handle Scripture carefully, responsibly, to not twist it to fit our own agendas.
Absolutely. And Francis ends with this powerful call to action. We're called to fight injustice, guided by the Holy Spirit.
He mentions prayer, peaceful protest, adoption, ministry, sharing our faith, building relationships across cultural divides.
It's not passive faith. It's active love, demonstrating God's heart for justice and liberation.
And then Reverend Dwight Fairclough brings us full circle back to Moses' questioning after Pharaoh's resistance.
Exodus 5.22-23 again. Moses' frustration, his doubts, it's so relatable.
It is. But God immediately reassures him in Exodus 6.1, I will bring you out, he says. He emphasizes his power, the certainty of deliverance.
God's promises aren't based on our circumstances, they're based on his character.
And he reminds Moses of the covenant, the promise of the land. It's like grounding their hope in God's faithfulness.
He's not forgetting them. He sees their suffering. He remembers his promises.
And then we get those 7 I will statements again. that unwavering commitment, the bedrock of their faith.
But as we heard before, the Israelites couldn't receive it in that moment. They were overwhelmed by their discouragement.
It shows how suffering can cloud our vision, make it hard to hear God's promises.
It can. But God still tells Moses and Aaron to go back to Pharaoh. Despite the resistance, he's not giving up.
Fairclough stresses that God's promise to deliver will never fail, even when it seems impossible.
Our circumstances don't dictate God's faithfulness.
They don't. And Fairclough reminds us that the path to deliverance isn't always easy. There might be increased opposition, even as God is working things out.
It's like those birth pangs, right? Things getting intense before the new life breaks through.
And he echoes the importance of obedience, not our own sense of worthiness or ability. God commands, we act.
And we need that community support to encourage each other when the road gets tough.
We do, and Fairclough points back to Moses' life. A flawed man, full of doubts, yet God used him mightily.
It's a testament to God's grace. He could work through anyone, even us.
And we get that genealogy again. It's like this reminder of their God-given authority, their place in the story.
It's all woven together. And then, like the others, Fairclough points us to Jesus, the ultimate deliverer who freed us from sin through his sacrifice.
The Exodus foreshadowing that perfect redemption. And he ends with the call to share that freedom with others.
It's like a ripple effect, isn't it? God's redemptive work spreading outward through us.
It is. So as we wrap up this deep dive, we've seen how the Exodus story is more than just ancient history. It's a living testament to God's redemptive character and our role in his plan.
We've explored the need for deliverance, God's unwavering plan, the challenge of obedience, the reality of hardship, and ultimately, the certainty of God's promise to deliver. And it all culminates in the redemption we find in Jesus Christ.
It's been a rich journey, and we hope this has sparked some theological reflection for you, some deeper understanding of God's work, both in history and in your own life.
What parts resonated most with you? What questions are you left with?
We encourage you to keep wrestling with these truths. And for more resources or to connect with Metropolitan Baptist Church, visit metrobc.us.
You can also subscribe to their YouTube channel for tons of great content.
Thanks for joining us on the Grace Notes podcast.
Thanks for tuning in to another Grace Notes episode. Drop a comment below and let us know what's your thoughts. Check the description for links to the reference sources and our full podcast playlist. Don't forget to like and share this episode. Help us in reaching people where they are and pointing them to Jesus, the living hope.